Here now is Circa News national security correspondent Sarah Carter. Sarah, do I have all that right? Is that a good summary?
Yes, it was a great summary. There was one little change that just happened right before I came on your show, Sean. And what was really interesting, John and I spoke to some very senior U.S. officials. They clarified this. They said there was a FISA warrant in October that was looking at the overall Russian hacking investigation, but that the FBI, when they monitored the server at Trump Tower, it was actually located away from Trump Tower. It wasn't under the FISA. They did normal strategic type of FBI investigations that didn't require the FISA. So they went into the server, but they did not use the FISA to do that. They did have a FISA, however, in October at the exact same time as this investigation.
So there are two instances now of spying.
Two. Yes, wow. 2 instances. So this is completely new evidence. And remember, we all thought, and everybody had reported, that the server was inside Trump Tower. The server was not located in Trump Tower, according to our sources.
With the second issue warrant, whatever the FBI was doing, was that in Trump Tower?
That's what we don't know now. Because now that opens up a whole slew of questions, the questions you just brought up in your monologue, right? So those questions need to be answered. But what we do know is this. The people that were investigating Trump's server, they said that the FBI did not look into emails, they did not listen to his phone calls, and that they found no evidence at all of any type of crime associated with Trump business.
This is important what you're saying. The news media in this country has repeated this narrative that the Trump campaign were colluding with the Russians to undermine the electoral process. You're saying that you're reporting and look, John Solomon's worked for AP for what, 20 years, and you both worked together at the Washington Times, credible news organizations. So what you're saying is they found no evidence at all whatsoever of any collusion between the campaign and the Russians. True?
Absolutely true. They found no evidence of that. In fact, when we spoke to our sources who had direct access to this investigation, what was happening with the FBI, they didn't even find evidence of collusion with Lieutenant General Mike Flynn, which is interesting because even when those leaks came out and they were referring to the Logan Act and everybody saw this as part of a broad... Yeah, they thought this was part of the original investigation into Russian hacking and now President Trump. It wasn't. It was completely different. It was a completely separate incident, and the leak came out anyways. It was monitoring of Russian assets.
And that would be a felony as defined by the Espionage Act, as I understand it?
That is absolutely correct. And as you know, the Inspector General at the DOJ is now investigating both the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Very important. I want to stay on this story because we only have limited time. There's too much information in your piece and your new discovery. So you have confirmed that the FBI found no evidence of any collusion whatsoever. Nothing. Number two, you have confirmed that they did get a FISA warrant in October in the weeks leading up to the election. Correct?
That is correct.
And they also got somehow another warrant that allowed them to look into the Trump campaign. We don't know what the nature of that was.
We think it had to do with the banks in Russia, that they were looking at connections between President Trump and the banks in Russia, both which are Alpha Bank and SVB Bank. But we're not 100% certain on that. What we don't know is who was connected to that FISA. What was that FISA looking at? And that is very highly classified. Nobody wants to talk about that particular FISA right now. They said it did have to do with the Russian hacking on a very broad level, but it didn't hone in directly on Trump, is what I was told.
And the bottom line, too, is so far they found no collusion whatsoever, which I think is really important. And, you know, we don't know the degree to which, if they went to a server that might have been off-site, but it still took in the information from Trump Tower, then Donald Trump it's seemingly technically right. The New York Times used the term wiretapping. Now they're backtracking. But everybody in the media has called Donald Trump a liar when he sent out a tweet about President Obama being involved. Well, certainly it's his administration. And maybe, I don't know exactly how you call a wiretap. Does it have to be a phone call? If the government's looking into one server, can't you say they were tapping into it? Because that's how I would define it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are semantics, right? This is how people are using words. There is a distinction between a FISA and then a wiretapping, but they did tap. I mean, they were looking.
They were
into
investigating the president in the weeks leading up to the election, and you're saying there were 2 warrants, one FISA, one non-FISA.
Correct.
Okay, so now did they find anything at all? Anything at all?
According to the sources that we spoke with, they did not find any evidence that would lead to any kind of criminal prosecution of anyone on the Trump team. And that is what we were told.
So basically, you're told by people that he's totally exonerated. This whole Russian narrative the media's been running with has been a lie. It's been untrue. And that they've known it for some time and they never told us.
Well, to some extent, yes.
That's pretty scary. Now, one other thing, because I think this is very important. As it relates to who knew what, when, and where, the president made a very clever statement. He said, well, I didn't order, nor did anyone in the White House order the FISA investigation. But that's not an acknowledgement. Did he know? Did Ben Rhodes know? Did Loretta Lynch sign off on it? Did Valerie Jarrett know about this? Did Dan Pfeiffer? In the middle of a campaign, you have a sitting president with the power of the intelligence community looking into an opposition candidate in the weeks leading up to an election? Does that seem like something that is appropriate? Were there lies told to gather that FISA approval? Do we know if there was an attempt to get one in June, for example?
Well, what we know is that, according to our sources, there was really no attempt to get one in June. Now, that's what they said. We don't know that for fact yet. But what we do know is that in October, it was very interesting. Harry Reid came out and said, you know, there's going to be some explosive
Hillary Clinton tweeted it out a week before the election.
Hillary Clinton tweeted that out. So people were getting a whiff of this, and we believe that people were briefed on this. So this is when everything started. And this is what these intelligence officials are telling us. Look, this has become highly politicized. From October all the way through January with the removal of General Flynn from the NSA, you know, this has become so politicized that they're watching this in horror and they wanted to set the record straight.
I have one last question. We did learn from WikiLeaks that the CIA uses stolen malware to give attribution, if you will, to cyber attacks to other nations. In other words, they leave the fingerprints. They could do the job and leave the fingerprints and say, oh, it looks like the Russians did it. Is that possible that that happened here?
I mean, that's something that we have to investigate. I have no evidence of that, but it is. But they are capable. They are capable, and so.